citizens of the internet. Looks like I got my technical difficulties figured out, and the mic is firing on all cylinders tonight. None of that BS. We got a good show for you tonight. A lot going on this week in the leftist, or the not really even leftist. I don't even know if I would call it leftist anymore. I would say the political talk world. Let's put it that way. And let's just dive right into it. Why don't we? So I want to talk first about Jimmy Dore and RFK. And I don't even have clips for this. I just want to talk to y'all about it. Because, first of all, I don't think anyone in this space has more credibility than Jimmy Dore does. So let's start with that. And people were, so if you saw his interview with RFK Jr., there were a lot of people that took issue with it. And most of the people that took issue with it were the types of people who will take issue with anything Jimmy Dore does. The guy's trending at least 3 times a week. And I mean, those people like the Vanguard kids who pause their Roblox game long enough to complain about it, they're always going to say something bad about Jimmy. That's what they're in the space for. That's what the DNC pays them for, whatever consulting firm, or the DNC funnels PAC money through for them to, bread tube and pretend that Biden is cool or whatever they're doing. We're going to get into some stuff later on with Cenk. So just hold on to fasten your seatbelts on that. But I think this is my take on the Jimmy Dore thing, since you care. I think Jimmy held RFK Jr.'s feet to the fire. I really do. And the beginning of the conversation, the buildup to that was friendly, very friendly, because RFK is talking about a lot of stuff that no one else is talking about. He was one of the first people censored by the Biden team. And, he's been out in front on the COVID stuff, whether you like him or you don't. His voice is, I think, important. And it's good that someone of his stature is out there speaking, and he's a lawyer, so he's smart. And, I think his voice has improved. A lot of people are like, I just can't listen to him talk. His voice is so grating. But I think that has improved a little bit. And I think, okay, so this might be controversial for some people. But do you remember Jeremy Corbyn? Do you remember what happened to Jeremy Corbyn? Do you remember how the establishment even tried to anti-Semite Bernie Sanders? Do you remember that? Like Bernie Sanders, they tried to compare Bernie Sanders supporters to Nazis. I'm old enough to remember when Cenk of Young Turks ran for Congress, and the New York Times, and tried to anti-Semite him. And the way that they did it, I remember it so clearly, and we're going to talk about it again in a little while, but they printed a conversation he had with David Duke without context, where David Duke said, "I'm not a racist," and Cenk said, "Of course you're not," in his Cenk way. And on paper, it looks like this: "I'm not a racist. Of course you're not." And that's what the NY Times did. They kind of like low key left the context out, as so many people like to do. So, I mean, right there, it's kind of like that's just 3 examples off the top of my head I can think of that have been anti-Semited, right? Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders, and Cenk. And I'm sure there are plenty more examples. I'm sure they would try to do it to Trump if they thought they could get away with it. But the point I'm getting to is that RFK Jr., the stuff that he's saying, is a threat to big pharma. It's a threat to a lot of big companies. And the Israel thing is a kind of a clever political shield, I think. And I mean, it may be cynical to say that, but I'm not an anti-Semite. RFK is not an anti-Semite. So I think by him taking kind of a little bit more of a tone-deaf, extreme position on Israel, it gives him a shield against being anti-Semited, like the Jeremy Corbyns of the world. So love it or hate it, be mad at me about it, but I think that's the reality. And I think it's smart of him to play that card. Now, dig into the nuance of the things he's saying. He's definitely saying some stuff that is very disconnected from reality and sounds like the kind of thing that a Zionist would say. By the same token, I've heard him say, I support the Palestinians and their right to exist and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think that he's some evil, I've seen people online, and that's the thing. Leftists are so dramatic. People are so dramatic. One person, one candidate has one issue you disagree, and suddenly it's the end all be all worst thing that ever happened in the universe. This person's the most terrible. He's a baby killer, Palestinian baby killer. You're every bit as bad as the conservatives. You're even worse, actually. The blue MAGA people are even worse with the drama queening about that stuff. And let's be honest, the Republicans invented that stuff. Remember how they used to throw tantrums over the like the red Starbucks cups, or they don't say Merry Christmas. Oh, that's how the liberals are now. They're those people. They're the war on Christmas people. Are the vote blue no matter who people now that think every little thing is just like, RFK being a little bit gung-ho on Israel means he's a Palestinian murderer suddenly. That's how stupid these people get with this kind of stuff. And it's like, look, I don't like RFK's take on Israel, and honestly, don't donate money to him. I wouldn't donate money to him. He's not going anywhere in the Democratic primary. Okay. That's the one thing that's clear is that. So if you want to be mad about his Israel take, if you want to, say all this extreme, stupid, like just political distortions that he's a Palestinian baby killer and all this stuff because his views are a little bit, hawkish to put it nicely on Israel, then, do your thing. Don't donate to him. Like, you know what I mean? I don't understand why everyone's just so willing to burn massive bridges because of one disagreement on one issue. I think if you sat down, and I hope that Max gets a chance to, it looks like he's kind of being dodgy. And see, the other side of this is there's a lot of people in this space that play these kind of things up for clicks and all that kind of stuff too. And honestly, you know what? I love Jimmy Dore. I'm not going to do that. I'm not here to play it up for clicks or whatever. I'm going to tell you, my honest opinion on the situation, and that's that. And I am definitely going to stand up for Jimmy Dore at every point because he's been right about everything. And I think even when he's wrong or he has a misinformed take, he comes around and says it. And but I haven't seen that lately. And I think his motives are genuinely good. And there is an entire ecosystem of people like Sabby and RBN and Do Dissidence and Max Blumenthal and Aaron and Gray Zone and Katie Halper and all these people that I think are being lifted up as a result of Jimmy. And I'm not saying that they owe their success to Jimmy. I'm not saying that no one would know who they are if it weren't for Jimmy. I'm saying people like me, I know who Max Blumenthal and Katie Halper are because of Jimmy Dore, because I watched Jimmy Dore and he has them on his show. I know who Shamar Swan is because of Jimmy Dore. I know who, Jose Vega, who does those protests because of Jimmy Dore. I know who Cornel West and Bernie Sanders are. Well, I knew about Cornel West before Jimmy Dore, but you get the idea, right? Cornel West was on Stephen Colbert. I think that's the first place I really acquainted myself with Cornel West, and that was in 2009. And I made a peace with that. But anyway, I think that's the thing that the key point I wanted to make about RFK is I think it's kind of a savvy political move. The type of candidate that he is, he's a middle of the road candidate too. He's got a lot of Republican and right wing support, and the idea that you need to cancel him because his position on Israel isn't sufficiently, on the side of the Palestinians. I mean, go ahead, fine. That's you. Do you throw your tantrum about it? throw your little tantrum, pretend you don't donate money to the guy. I really don't. We'll see how things pan out. But and Max Blumenthal has argued that's probably where he's getting his money, which is why he's so hawkish on Israel. He's probably getting money from a PAC that, is working with Israel. So whatever. Again, I told Willie Bragg the other day, my position on Israel might be a little bit to the right of a lot of people on the left, because I know a lot of Israelis personally. I've worked for and with a lot of Israelis, and I had a friend, Gail, a woman, who told me, like, you don't know what it's like to grow up with your town being shelled, and why are they doing it? It's a back and forth. And so, like I said, but I also, my general stance on anything is to side with the oppressed, to side with the underdog. That's my personal view in any situation. So, this is an issue that I'm a little torn on, but I also have never been to Israel. I've never lived in Israel. I'm not Israeli. I'm not even Jewish. And so, I want to be as balanced as I can on that, but it's not, for me, RFK's position on Israel is not a deal breaker. It really isn't. So, but that's me. And a lot of other people, I'm sure, feel different, and that's fine. But again, I'm not going to donate money to RFK, and I'm definitely not going to vote for a Democrat. So this is a moot conversation to begin with, because unless you're going to vote in a Democratic primary, or you think you're going to vote in a Democratic primary, it really doesn't matter what you think about RFK. It really doesn't. Anyway, so I was watching Dissidence earlier, and oh, by the way, Jimmy's gonna have Cornel West on the show. And before we change subjects here, that is the one point Sabby made that I do agree with. That Jimmy was like super like crusty about Cornel West on Anderson Cooper, but a little bit, more cordial with RFK. Now, obviously, when Jimmy was being salty, he wasn't being salty directly at Cornel West. He was upset. I think he's largely upset that he hasn't talked to Cornel West yet. But the point of me even bringing all this up is Cornel West is going to be on Jimmy's show. So Jimmy can take it up directly with Cornel West, and I'm sure it will be great. And every time I've seen Jimmy on, he's said he's going to vote for Cornel West, which is where I'm at. I'm voting. I'm not voting for a Democrat. I will, if I vote, I will not vote for Democrats. So unless Cornel West is on the ballot in my county in California, I probably won't even vote in this cycle, because what's the point, So anyway, moving on. This ties together because I was just watching Dissidence, and these guys, I really, really like Keaton and Russell, and they have a fantastic show. And I want to play this clip of Keaton so today they had Thomas Frank on. And if you don't know who Thomas Frankenstein, if you don't know who Thomas Frank is, he wrote a book called What's the Matter with Kansas a long time ago. That was kind of his like magnum opus, that was the first in his trilogy, I guess, if you want to call it that. And so he also wrote a book called Listen Liberal, which is, Thomas Frank is basically the OG when it comes to lecturing liberals on being populist, basically. His whole take in What's the Matter with Kansas and Listen Liberal was that the Democrats are not sufficiently populist enough. So listen to this, because this is basically what I think is great here. What Keaton talks about here is class solidarity, and I feel like I'm in a similar boat to Keaton, because I'm not poor, but I'm far from rich. And what he says here just resonated so hard with me. So I might have to push
that dream, that hope is completely gone.
So the first scoop here is Thomas Frank admits he understands why people would vote for Trump.
For so many people. And right. They have a sense of bitterness that is hard to put into words. And it's apparently the only, and Trump speaks to it.
Yes.
You know, much as I hate to admit it. And the Democratic Party, which should be the natural, right? The party of Roosevelt, party of Bryan, party of Johnson, et cetera, should be the ones who are out in front of this, but they aren't.
Okay. I just want to make fucking sure. All right. Just want to make sure I got the sound selected, because I do that all the time and I get so mad at myself. So anyway, let's keep going here.
That dream, that hope is completely gone for so many people. And here's the Trump belt, party of Bryan, party of Johnson, et cetera, should be the ones who are out in front of this, but they aren't. They can't figure it out. They've become this different beast. We're not going to talk about that now because your viewers obviously know about that. I don't know what's going to happen. It's not a good situation when, you know, well, it's a dreadful situation. I don't have any answers. Here now, what can I say to really make people start to cry here now that we're turning it off? Well, it's an absolutely shitty situation. I don't know how I don't know what the answer to it is. My crystal ball has gone foggy. I can't tell what's going to happen, and right now it looks like God. I'm not going to say it. Okay.
Well,
no, I'm done.
What were you going to say?
I think a Trump second term looks likely.
All right. Well, there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be afraid of.
He's something to be afraid of. He's.
I don't think so. Look, what I would say is when you speak to that level of hopelessness, that level of despair, you know, because I started out the 2020 cycle somewhat radicalized, but I was not a Bernie or Buster at the start of that cycle. I was convinced that Trump was worth getting rid of. But then a couple of people talked to me. They said, you know, when you talk about people who need medical debt cancellation in order to live, in order to keep a roof over their head, or people who need universal health care or need their student debt forgiven or need these things that Bernie's talking about, if they stand up and say, okay, we are willing to go all in for this and threaten the Democrats with annihilation if they don't capitulate. This narrative that the PNC,
that's what's been happening. That is de facto what has been happening.
I don't know if I unmuted my mic before, but what Keaton's saying, this next piece of what he says is the absolute most profound, most important thing that anyone who considers himself progressive or leftist should hear and take note of.
Since, you know, for years. And that's the message of what's the matter with Kansas and the message of Listen Liberal. And that message never got through. The message
at a certain point, like, look, my wife works at a hospital. We're not poor, right? You're obviously not a poor man. Russell is not a poor man either.
At all those books.
Look at all those books. At a certain point, I think solidarity with desperate people in desperate need means willing to go all in with them, even if it means sacrificing an uncomfortable situation for us. Now, I personally still don't feel I have much to lose if Trump wins, but if you do, that's fine. I think part of solidarity with these populist type movements means being able to say to the UPS worker who is loading boxes from midnight to 8 in the morning, working Walmart noon to 8 at night, 5 days a week, who's at the end of his rope. Part of solidarity with those workers is saying, we are with you in demanding what you need, or else we will let this country burn.
Yes.
And that is what solidarity sounds like to me. Solidarity does not sound like, well, yeah, we're going to try, but then we're going to blink at the last second and give Joe Biden 4 more years because Trump is scary.
Do you think? Yeah.
There it is. There it is. Thank you, Keaton. So eloquently phrased and stated. Because this idea that Trump is that's why they keep indicting him. It's so crazy watching what's going down. And, you know, it seems like the Republicans are getting closer to something with what they're doing with Hunter Biden stuff. And I mean, there's obvious corruption there. But that is the key right here. I mean, I objectively was better off when Trump was president. I made more money. I was happier. Things were better. I didn't feel like we were on the brink of World War III. The press was having a tantrum and throwing a fit because Clinton didn't get in, the woman who owns all of them. But other than that, life was good when Trump was president. So he said something. Thomas Frank said something in that rant that was so great. He said, "My crystal ball has gone foggy." And of course, I immediately thought of Krystal Ball. And of course, I have a piece of tape to share with you. So watch this.
If we buy every single time that you have no other choice than to back whatever bad candidate is put in front of us, then we're going to keep getting the treatment that we get now. I mean, what would you do if Michael Bloomberg was the nominee, right? What would you do if Mitt Romney was the nominee? It's just, they can go down this path as far and as right-wing as they want, as long as we're willing to be good soldiers and buck it up, and at the end of the day say, you know what, guys, you're right. We're all on the team together. Vote blue no matter who.
No, I disagree.
And they want to wait around for some theoretical revolution. I'm sorry, grow up, get serious. This is a actual path to having an impact on the issues that you claim to care about. Now, if you've got another candidate, you got another strategy, please, I'm all ears. But the reality of the American political system today is we have a first past the post voting system that makes it virtually impossible for third-party candidates to compete.
It only took her 3 years to turn into Cenk Uygur. I wonder what changed. So Krystal Ball's obviously foggy, but I want to play you another clip that I just love to play. A clip I got, of course, from Jimmy Dore. But check this out. This is someone I think who knows a lot about the Democratic Party, and he's going to tell you something. Listen to this.
If you want to pull the party, the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them. If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party, because the left had nowhere to go. If you want to...
The left had nowhere to go. Now, before we close out this segment, I want to show you one more clip, because people forget a lot of times, and I don't watch mainstream media anymore, but if you watch mainstream media enough, they will tell you the truth. If you listen closely, they will tell you the truth. Check this out. This is a clip I have saved from the Bernie days. And just listen to what this guy says. Listen to what he says, and you tell me if it's worth voting for RFK Jr.
Well, just what Nick said, I think that's right. I mean, there is no Democratic establishment anymore. There's not even a Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party is a meaningless notion. That the party, like the Republican Party, has been hollowed out and privatized to a large extent. There are Democratic elites, and so when we talk about the Democratic establishment, we're really talking about a bunch of people that Nick also knows well, which really means Democratic donors. And Democratic donors are freaking out over the prospect of a socialist. I would say if you talk to the average Democratic donor, big money donor, not small dollar donor, in New York City, they are almost as concerned, if not equally concerned, about Bernie Sanders being the nominee as they are about beating Donald Trump. And Sanders poses an incredibly intense threat to that. I think, as Nick said, right now, I will lean into this, Nicole. I think, it's a jump ball here, but there's a candidate who's the tallest candidate on the court right now, and that's Bernie Sanders at this moment. Now, that doesn't mean he will get the tip, but he's the tallest candidate on the court coming into the caucus tonight, and if he wins here tonight and goes to New Hampshire, where he won in 2016 by 22 points, and is leading by double digits over everybody else in that state, he could easily win the first two contests. He's running neck and neck with Joe Biden right now in Nevada. So a world where Bernie Sanders wins the first 3 of the 4 early states is a world where he is a freight train coming out of February. And if you think the Democratic donors, the Democratic elite, the Democratic establishment, whatever the phrase you want to use, but the people who think they run the Democratic Party and used to run the Democratic Party, if you think they're freaking out right now, give me a call on the eve of Super Tuesday when Bernie Sanders, with that wind at his back and with a money machine, a low-dollar donor machine that will give him almost unlimited resources to compete all the way through, not just June, but all the way to the convention.
The panic on their faces. Oh my God. I see. This is why I love Trump now. It's like, okay, well, you know, these people crushed Bernie Sanders right out the gate, but it's like, if look at how disgusted these slime bags are by Trump. You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? It's kind of like, but that's the only reason I wanted to show you that is because that's the reality that you're dealing with. Joe Biden is the front for that group of donors this guy was just talking about. He's the puppet. He's their, you know, he's their weekend at Bernie's. You know, he's the marionette that they're dragging around. You think Joe Biden controls absolutely nothing. They put him on stage so he can crap his pants and, you know, say some stuff that sounds funky. And, you know, it's looking more and more like they're going to throw him to the wolves and try to install someone else like Gavin Newsom. But let's just continue down this pathway here. And let's continue talking about how the Democrats are neocons, because I just have a wealth of great stuff for y'all tonight to just really hammer this point home that the Democrats are probably the greater of the two evils. I mean, I gotta say, you know, one of the things that Thomas Frank and Dissidence were talking about earlier is the history of political parties. And I don't know if you know this or not, but the Republican Party was literally formed to end slavery. The Democrats and the Whigs, the existing parties before that, they both were cool with it, you know? And so that's the actual, like, the Democratic Party predates the Republicans, and all the racist slave owners were part of the Democratic Party. Now, a lot of people know that, but you don't really think about that. And of course, you know, I've gotten into arguments with people before about how it changed. It totally changed. The party shifted in, you know, during the Goldwater era. A lot of people don't want to talk about Goldwater and the Southern strategy. You know, what's his name? Reagan's political guy. So all you Republican leaning people or right-wing leaning people are like, the Democrats are the party of the KKK and they're the racist party. They were originally, but it did switch for a while. And Lee Atwater, that's the guy's name. Lee Atwater, go Google it. Go Google Lee Atwater Southern Strategy. They have this guy on tape saying the N-word. He basically explains the Southern strategy. They have this stuff on tape. So, you know, and now I think, you know, I don't think that there's no racists in the Democratic Party and there's no racists in the Republican Party. Who cares? Honestly, who really cares? If they're doing stuff or they're trying to pass legislation that's racist, call me and we'll oppose it. But more and more, this like racism shit gets used as a cudgel, you know, to beat your brain into a position that you might not otherwise take. And it's really getting to a stupid degree. And they're doing it too with like the trans and LGBTQ stuff as well. And, you know, I've never talked to an LGBTQ person who doesn't go, drag queens was always an adult thing. I don't know why they're like, it seems like an op that they're trying to send kids to drag queen shows. It's a weird, like divisive thing that would not normally be happening. So that's a whole other tangent. But let's start by, so what I want to do is kind of lay out some parallels for you, okay? Because I see a big part of my you know, foundation in politics is the Iraq War, okay? So I really got involved with politics during the Iraq War. And because of the way my brain works, when I get highly emotional about something, I retain it really well. It's like it's like a white fire of anger. I'm like, oh, this makes me so mad. I will never forget this. So I just remember a lot of, and I see them all the time. I see all these parallels from the Iraq war popping up. And, I just want to share a couple of them with you. So let's start with this video here of Hillary Clinton. And, I've been hammering on this for a little while, but a lot of people forget that the reason Barack Obama won the Democratic primary is because of Hillary Clinton's Iraq war support. So listen to this. Listen to this. If we can get it to play. Of course, it's not going to play for me now. The Clintons control the universe. I knew it. I'm sure it has something to do with Twitter's tech. We'll just refresh.
Intelligence in the 4 years since the inspectors left, intelligence reports show that Saddam Hussein has worked to rebuild his chemical and biological weapons stock, his missile delivery capability, and his nuclear program. He has also given aid, comfort, and sanctuary to terrorists, including al-Qaeda members. It is clear, however, that if left unchecked, Saddam Hussein will continue to increase his capacity to wage biological and chemical warfare and will keep trying to develop nuclear weapons. Should he succeed in that endeavor, he could alter the political and security landscape of the Middle East, which, as we know all too well, affects American security. This is a very difficult vote. This is probably the hardest decision I've ever had to make. Any vote that might lead to war should be hard, but I cast it with conviction.
I think the one place where the greatest consternation would be caused in the short term for admission, having nothing to do with the merit and preparedness of the country to come in, would be to admit the Baltic states now in terms of NATO-Russian, U.S.-Russian relations. And if there was ever anything that was going to tip the balance, were it to be tipped in terms of a vigorous and hostile reaction, I don't mean military, in Russia, it would be that. So the way I look at the calculus here, I think the one place where the greatest consternation would be caused in the short term
and Ukraine, not because of some grand strategy, but essentially because he was caught off balance by the protests in the Maidan and Yanukovych then fleeing after we had brokered a deal to transition power in Ukraine. Since Mr. Putin made this decision around Crimea and Ukraine, not because of some grand strategy, but essentially because he was caught off balance by the protests in the Maidan and Yanukovych then fleeing after we had brokered a deal to transition power in Ukraine. Since
big effort, in fact, to find people who seem to have credible evidence about what was going on inside Iraq. Because, in fact, if you could find somebody who was credible talking about a nuclear program in Iraq or chemical weapons, that would be a big story.
And it worked. The New Yorker.
God damn it. God damn it. God damn it. All right. So I just realized my fucking mic was muted again. So I don't know if it's shorting out or if I'm just forgetting to unmute it, but that's on me. So we have all this stuff with Obama and the Maidan coup, and it leads up to this these parallels that I'm trying to show you here is how we are sold these wars. And Leslie Stahl, again, is one of those people who helped sell the Iraq war. And
Big effort,
Just listen
in
to this
fact,
clip,
to find
and I'll shut
people
up.
who seem to have credible evidence about what was going on inside Iraq. Because in fact, if you could find somebody who was credible talking about a nuclear program in Iraq or chemical weapons, that would be a big story.
And it worked. The New Yorker, USA Today, The Washington Post, The New York Daily News, The New York Times. And on PBS, just 2 months after 9/11, Frontline and The New York Times teamed up for a documentary on the defectors.
Captain Saba Kodada is a former Army officer who defected from Iraq. He made a crude drawing of what he says is a terrorist training camp on the outskirts of Baghdad.
There were caveats.
And a further caution. These defectors have been brought to Frontline's attention by one group of Iraqi dissidents, the INC, the Iraqi National Congress.
But the caveats couldn't compete with the spectacular tales told by defectors. Before the invasion, the New York Times' Judith Miller would write 6 prominent stories based on their testimony.
Ahmed Shalabi is a controversial leader of the Iraqi opposition.
And still on the web, a report about the defectors, narrated by Judith Miller and produced by New York Times Television for the NewsHour on PBS.
Well, Judy Miller had been an old friend of Chalabi, did a lot of the stories on Chalabi, was very favorable to Chalabi.
James Bamford found out that in 2001, Chalabi had arranged for Miller to meet in Thailand with a defector from Iraq named al-Hadari.
So I don't want to watch all this, but I want to show you.
Of course, read it, think tanks and stuff.
The first rule of the administration.
These Leslie Stahl clips.
In a lake in Central.
But in this story, the guy
said high government officials had confused,
which is the Department of Defense, only one source, and it hadn't been.
This might be a mislabeled. Oh, here we go. I think this is the piece where they talk about it.
The exercise was to blow up a full-size mock-up of a U.S. destroyer in a lake in central Iraq.
or jumping into pits of fouled water and having to kill a dog with your bare teeth. I mean, and this was coming from people who were appearing in all of these stories, and sometimes their rank would change.
Moussaoui told us that he has verified that this man was an officer in Iraq's ruthless intelligence service, the Mukhabarat.
And you're saying, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. Because in this story, he was a major, but in this story, the guy's a colonel. And in this story, this was his function, but now he says in this story, he was doing something else.
The defector is telling Moussaoui that in order to evade the UN inspectors, Saddam Hussein put his biological weapons laboratories in trucks that the defector told us he personally bought from Renault.
Refrigerator trucks, kind of thing. Yeah.
And how many?
7.
Leslie Stahl and CBS retracted their story a year after the invasion, when nearly all the evidence presented by defectors proved to be false.
Did you hear that? Leslie Stahl retracted her story a year after the invasion, after she ran all those stories that she knew were false. So I don't know how long my mic was turned off, but kind of what I'm trying to do again is just draw these parallels between the Iraq war and the setup for this Ukraine thing. And I think the point when my mic was paused, I was talking a little bit about Obama and him basically just saying right there on camera that the reason that Putin invaded Crimea was because I think the way he put it was we negotiated a transfer of power. We negotiated a transfer of power, aka we got rid of Yanukovych. Yanukovych fled after we negotiated a transfer of power. And so the hands of us are never kind of mentioned in this perfect world that a lot of these people live in, where we're the good guys, we're the good US guys, and everyone else is the bad guys. And that's how it's been since World War II, and that's how it's always going to be. And we don't ever do anything bad, and nothing happened in Ukraine before 2022, you know. And so anyway, jumping back up to where we're at, Leslie Stahl clearly helped sell the Iraq war by running these stories with these defectors, and it's debatable whether or not she knew they were fake or their stories were kind of hyped up. I mean, you would have to think that she did, to some degree. Well, if you're a good reporter, how wouldn't you vet those people? There's a piece the New York Times did recently called Caliphate, that the guy was a complete liar and they ended up embarrassing themselves. It's not the first and probably won't be the last time the New York Times embarrasses themselves. But so watch, to draw this parallel with Leslie Stahl, watch this clip of her grilling white supremacist Marjorie Taylor Greene now.
Let's talk about Ukraine. So you're opposed to giving weapons and aid to help Ukraine fight off the Russians. It strikes me that that's what Putin wants.
I don't really care about what Putin wants. I voted for the...
I love that answer. That is so... I love that answer. Now you understand why this woman is a racist, white supremacist, anti-vaxxer, Putin lover, whatever you need.
First resolution to denounce Putin and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What I have voted against is funding a war in Ukraine. The entire time I have been saying the United States needs to be pushing for peace in Ukraine, not funding a proxy war with Russia. We can't afford another foreign war.
If we withdraw our aid right now, then Russia will be right up on the Polish border. And that's a NATO country. And if they attack Poland, we'll have to come to their aid.
I've looked. I cannot find anywhere where Putin says he wants to invade Poland.
I'm asking if that doesn't worry you, and that we'll be concerned to the point that almost will be attacked because we're a member of NATO.
We are a member of NATO, and we have a treaty. Ukraine is not a NATO member nation, but look at us now. We are funding a proxy war in Ukraine with Russia. President Biden is committed, and he said he will go as far as he needs to go to defend Ukraine. And Ukraine is not a NATO member nation. So Russia is going in. Russia is fighting this war with Ukraine, not Poland.
What about the argument that if we withdraw our money and our weaponry now, China will read that as weakness? China will say the Americans can't be relied upon.
Listen to this.
And it might encourage China to invade Taiwan.
Now you're asking what happens if we just pull out of Ukraine?
Right.
Let me ask you a question back. Why can't we push for a peace deal in Ukraine?
But then
why is war the only answer?
The Russians will be rewarded with territory for invading a country.
I'm sorry, Ukraine is not the 51st state of the United States.
No, but is it right to let him attack another country that's not at war with them, and then you say just let them take what they've gotten so far?
It's not about right and wrong, but let me say this, it's not about what's right and wrong in Ukraine, because we're the United States of America. And again, we have mud all over our face, Leslie. We're $31 trillion in debt. We're not defending our own border. We're ignoring our own people's problem.
So, first of all, after watching that again, I do think that she knew that those defectors in the Iraq war were fake. Listen to her, just relentlessly pushing that stuff. And the other thing I think is funny is Marjorie Taylor Greene is supposed to be this dumb hick, anti-vax Trumper. She schooled her. She schooled Leslie Stahl. So that tells me also that Leslie Stahl is dumb on purpose. She knows that about the Maidan coup, and she knows about the history and the fact that the U.S. installed Zelensky as leader after the previous leaders, Poroshenko and Yanukovych, were out. And Obama just said it, in that clip I just played. So it's just another one of those things where when the rubber meets the road, the line that the press is saying makes no sense. It makes no sense. You just watched Marjorie Taylor Greene school Leslie Stahl. And the other thing that's funny about that is I guarantee you that was edited as selectively as possible to make her look as dumb as they could possibly make her look without completely, ruining the video and chopping it up into little bits. So anyway, I want to show you another little parallel that I found today that I thought was very interesting between the Iraq war and the current Ukraine fiasco. And so check this out. They have this bit right here, and just listen to some of this.
There's a notion that this is the person that we go after this week. Fox News and talk radio and the conservative bloggers, I mean, they were banging those drums very loud, and everyone in the press could hear it. Not only was it just liberal bias, it was an anti-American bias, an unpatriotic bias, and that these journalists were really not part of America.
And every sound familiar, you Putin puppet?
Journalists knew it. They had and they have a very effective slime machine. And the way it works is you either report the news the way we want it reported, or we're going to hang a sign around your neck.
I will call those who...
Oh my God. Let's hear that again.
Reported, or we're going to hang it. And the way it works is you either report the news the way we want it reported, or we're going to hang a sign around your neck.
You
I will call
Putin puppet.
those who publicly criticize their country in a time of military crisis, which this is, bad Americans.
There's a level of vitriol and vindictiveness that is very scary to listen to. And you think the millions of people listening to them,
And
the media have become
all the people who did this now are Democrats.
sort of like the whipping boy, because they know that the press,
Well, not all, but most.
can provide information that runs counter to what the government is claiming, to what the Bush administration is claiming.
Now, Johnny. On his new MSNBC talk show, Phil Donahue discovered just what
This
could
is
happen
actually
when you
really
step
good.
out
I'm
of
going to
line.
let this run. You should
Any
see
more
this.
protesters taking on the government? Is there a place for them in this post-9/11 world, or are they just downright unpatriotic?
I just felt, what would be wrong with having one show a night, say, hold it, wait a minute, can we afford this? And do we have enough troops? And what about General Shinseki? And where are all, what is Guantanamo? What's wrong with this? I felt people who didn't like my message would watch me because no one else was doing it. That's why I couldn't get over the unanimity of opinion on cable. The drum was beating. Everybody wanted to bomb somebody. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. So here I go. I mean, fool that I am. I rushed in.
Scott Ritter is here, and so is Ambassador Butler.
You had Scott Ritter, former weapons inspector, who was saying that if we invade, it'll be a historic blunder.
Yes, but we didn't have Malone. He had to be there with.
Scott Ritter was 100% proven correct. That's why he's a pedophile.
Someone else who supported the war. In other words, you couldn't have Scott Ritter alone. You could have Richard Pearl alone.
You could have the conservative.
You could have the supporters of the president alone. And they would say why this war is important. You couldn't have a dissenter alone. Our producers were instructed to feature 2 conservatives for every liberal.
You're kidding.
No, this is absolutely
Instructed
true.
from above?
Yes. I was counted as 2 liberals.
They're underselling you.
I had to have 2. There's just a terrible fear. And I think that's the right word.
Eric Sorensen, who was the president of MSNBC, told the New York Times, quote, any misstep and you can get into trouble with these guys and have the patriotism police.
Have the patriotism police shut you down. And oh, did they? So now I want to show you that parallel, the patriotism police. Who are the patriotism police of today? Well, did it get in here? Oh, here it is. I don't know how it got all the way up here, but listen to this.
The retired Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor said on Fox last night, quote, "Their casualties are horrific. We have effectively seen the Russians destroy 3 separate armies built by the Ukrainians, and everybody is beginning to wonder what's really happening." I hope Macgregor was paid for this. I hope Macgregor was paid for this by Putin. I hope he was paid a lot. I hope he can find somewhere to spend it all in hell, to charge through in what is clearly the next big fascist push in this country, the attempt to get America to betray Ukraine and serve Putin. All of which lines up perfectly with what is being broadcast in Russia on Vladimir Putin's propaganda channel, and for which Colonel Macgregor should be recalled from retirement and court-martialed as an unregistered foreign agent, and who, as I have noted previously here, would probably be described as a Russian asset, except who could ever think he's an asset to anybody?
So it only literally took 10 years and Trump to flip Keith Olbermann, to make Keith Olbermann literally Fox News, the people he used to hate, the people he used to rail against constantly. And it's crazy. So I just want to show you, I always show this Matt Gaetz clip about Ukraine. But I think this one's a little bit better. So what this lady does right here is she gives away the game on what the plan is in Ukraine. And I can't remember her name, but I think maybe they show it. She writes for The Atlantic. Listen to this.
That we had reasons that Putin doesn't have in going into Ukraine, but that's not how they see it. So their view is, and yes, China and Russia never had any love for each other. Even during the Cold War, when they were both communists, and they should have been allied closer, it was very frosty. But their idea is we have to just be, number one is to be anti-America. America is the one who's trying to bully the world. We've seen it over and over again, and we have to line up against them. That, I think, is the scary part, is because they're going to get more people to join in on that premise.
Yeah, and I think that there's the eternal folly that
So
wars
listen to
are
this.
won quickly, which we learned twice that wasn't true recently. And I think that the Russian engagement in Ukraine is going to last for many, 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 many years to come.
Many, 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 many years to come. Many, many, many years to come. That Russian engagement in Ukraine, that's going to last for many, many, many years to come. And I'll just switch it around. I'll play the Matt Gaetz clip for you once again, because I play this clip a lot, but it's worth seeing. Matt Gaetz is a G. Listen to this.
Boris Johnson that literally go to Ukraine and say, no, you're not going to even sit at the table here with the Russians. Do you think 1 year from now, 10 years from now, there's some kind of possibility for peace here, or is this just going to be a
who makes money on a
forever?
peace deal?
That's true. Yep.
Right? I mean, peace is not nearly as profitable to those who are in the war business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so obviously I have to say it out loud. I mean, to me, our involvement in Ukraine is directly linked to our diminished involvement in Afghanistan. Like, Afghanistan was the money laundering capital of the world for like a lot of our lifetime. A lot of that cash was like run through Dubai and, Abu Dhabi. And when that was not the corrupt country that we just decided to pour American cash on, like, we needed another historically corrupt country to go pour American military material and cash into.
And gain of function research too.
And Ukraine fit the bill. And so I don't believe that like anyone's really working toward peace. I think that there are very powerful interests that benefit if this is a long-term, low-yield war.
Yes, CNN is even reporting right now that the United States is running low on some weapons and ammunition.
There it is. Long-term, low-yield war. We're not losing any troops, so no sweat off our backs. Well, since we've been discussing the Brunchlib contingent today, I thought we would jump on to a tangent with the king of all Brunchlibs, Cenk Uygur. Now, you're gonna love this, I think. Cenk was on, if you haven't seen it, and I'm guessing a lot of you probably haven't because it's relatively new, but Cenk was on the PBD podcast, and they talked about a lot of things. And honestly, I gotta say, I actually was not as pissed off at Cenk as I expected to be. You know, I mean, but I mean, he's obviously terrible. He's a terrible hypocrite who is completely unself-aware. But there was some stuff that he said where I went, oh, okay, maybe he's not as bad as I thought. And then he would, you know, of course, correct me in the next clip. But let's watch a little bit of this together and listen to some. So in this first bit, they're talking about Ukraine. And since we've been talking about Ukraine, I think it's a nice little segue. And just listen to Cenk's very uninformed take.
Because they're creating the boogeyman, the, you know, Hegelian dialectic, whatever you want to call it, to put the fear in before we say, no, we told you, this is a very problematic man. We have to get him to be replaced. Do you think there's any indication of a future truth telling us that, you know, in their own political way, because they're more pros at propaganda than you and I are, we got to get rid of this guy. The world's a safer place if we get rid of Putin. And then all of a sudden they get rid of him. So one, you're saying no because you already addressed that. No, I don't think that's really what's going on. But two, let's say they do. Let's say they succeed. Let's say in the next 6, 12 months, 18 months, they get what they want. Assuming that's what they want. What happens next if Putin gets replaced?
Look, I despise Putin, and I've made no, bones about that. I've been very clear. I've been so clear. Russia Today asked me for interviews right after I criticized Putin, and they're like, "Oh, well, we'd just like to interview." I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. Why today? Well, what would you like to talk about?" They're like, "The Armenian genocide." I was like, interesting, interesting. So Putin is apparently perfectly aware of how much I despise him, but I think the idea of getting rid of him is absolutely disastrous. So if I was advising the president, I would say, how in the world do you know who would replace him, right? So maybe it's a much better guy. Maybe it's a much worse guy.
Yeah, the guy from the Wagner group.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
warlord.
I mean, you guys, really? Is there any question? Is it like, could anyone look at the last 20 years and go, yeah, probably not a good idea. Probably not a good idea.
Right? That's a huge possibility, and that guy is much more of a warlord, and he's a private mercenary and very dangerous, etc. So as much as
Prigozhin,
guy, that's right. And as much as I think Putin has done great damage to the world, I don't think it's our business to go interfere with how they're selecting their leaders. Look, I think a lot of our homelands have terrible leaders. I don't like Erdogan in Turkey. I think Netanyahu in Israel is a disaster. I can go on, right? But that doesn't mean we got to go meddle in their business and tell them what to do, right? And so, hey, get out of Ukraine, perfectly legitimate. But the minute you step an inch into Russia or Russian politics, it is a disaster. Do not do that. Get the hell out of there as soon as you can.
What success have we had, the United States, in any sort of regime change in the last 50 years?
Never. Never.
Name one that regime change has worked out well. Gaddafi in Libya, all right? Iraq, Saddam Hussein, the list goes on. I mean, can you think of one?
Yeah. Well, look.
I like this
so
guy.
Yeah, Saddam was a terrible guy. Gaddafi was a terrible guy, but did we replace them with folks who are better? I mean, how many people did we kill to get there?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's cool about this show is these guys have they have like kind of it's kind of a roundtable discussion to some degree, right? So they have this guy who just kind of put Cenk in his place about the regime change stuff. He's kind of like the liberal voice on the show. And PBD, Pat Bet-David, is kind of the, it's his show. But he's like a lot of these, he's like the total like Persian conservative cat. I'm pretty sure he's Iranian. No, he's Armenian. My bad. Armenian. Sorry, Pat. So he's because him and Cenk, he talks about Cenk being Turkish or and him being Armenian at the beginning and how they're both angry people. So anyway, when it starts to get dicey, I'm just making sure my mic is on, is when they start talking about Trump. So check this out. This is very interesting. Cenk, hearing Cenk's take it, and he by the way, he's on a book tour, as you can see.
And part of the reason, and this is what establishment media does not understand about Donald Trump. Yes, I think Hillary Clinton said two correct things in her life. One of them was the deplorable line that everybody hates. No, that's totally true. In my opinion, half the Republican base is deplorable. And
in his opinion, I mean, I disagree. I really think that the amount of true, like, evil racist people is a lot smaller than we're made to believe. But that's my personal opinion.
And I think they are racist, bigots, sexist, etc. We could talk half, easily half. Okay, but the other half,
that's 40 million people in America.
Absolutely, not even close.
You believe that?
100%. We could debate it. Okay, but hold on. Let me get to the other 40 million. Okay, the other 36 million or so that voted for Trump. No, they're just angry that the establishment is screwing them, and they don't know how they're getting screwed.
That's exactly what Charlie Kirk said.
Right, and that's
they're
what
scorned.
And they hate mainstream media, and they're right, because mainstream media is a factory of lies. So they'll say, "Oh, the status quo is great." For who? Yeah, the billionaires who run those companies and the millionaires who are on air. Yes, for you guys, everything's hunky dory, but it's not.
I love how Cenk will sit and say that the mainstream media is a factory of lies, but he believes everything that they told him about Trump.
Not great for when wages didn't go up for 45 straight years. Now, because of inflation, they ironically went up a little bit. But for 45 years straight, wages did not go up. Okay, we have no universal health care in this country when every other developed country in the world has it. We have no paid family leave. We send moms back to the assembly lines and coal mines the day after they deliver.
Okay, I want to tell you something. You hear what he's doing right here? You hear what he's doing? Do you remember what Keaton said at the beginning about class solidarity and about being willing to take it for people like what he's talking about right here? These people who are struggling. Cenk would not do that. Cenk and Anna and Kyle and Krystal and none of them did that. They all told you to vote for Biden, and not one of those things he's mentioned has been addressed by the Democrats. Not since Obama didn't do it. You know, Trump did a better job on a lot of this stuff than the Democrats did. So Cenk, you know, he can try to be honest here, but he's being disingenuous, because at the end of the day, him and Anna will turn around and tell you that the Democrats are better, despite them doing nothing on these things.
So we have corporate rule in America, and Chapter 5 is about the matrix, and that's mainstream media that lulls you back to sleep. Corporate power is awesome. Corporate rule is great. The lobbyists are innocent. The politicians, oh my God, they're such sweethearts. They're having ideological differences, and they're having debates. No, they're not. They're getting checks and then doing exactly as they are told, and that's true of 99% of the Republican Party, and yes, 80% of the Democratic Party at least.
Stop. The way you just said it was so funny.
And that's why you should vote for them, because they're only 10%. They're 10% less corrupt. At least that's better than Kyle Klinsky's trillion times better argument.
So 99% Republican Party, 80% the Democratic Party. Okay. Can you pull up the chart that just came up? This one right here. Total spending of presidential campaign financing in the United States. They changed a law, I think, in 2019, 2020. That allowed corporations to just open up their checkbooks. I'm sure you're familiar with this. Look at the kind of money we raised for presidential campaigns. From Carter, 197 million, to Reagan, 228 million, to Reagan again, 380, to Bush Sr., 346, to Clinton, 478, to Clinton again, 612, then it's Bush, 891, then it's Obama, I think it's, what's that, 1.769 billion, 1.4 billion again Obama, 1.529 million Hillary Trump. Boom! $4 billion, whatever they could to get rid of Trump. They spend all the money in the world to get rid of this guy. They figured out ways to say, dude, if we can outspend that guy, because, you know, we can be controlled. So this is the part where, for me, where we agree and where we disagree. This is the part. Like, I had Ari Fleischer here. You know who Ari Fleischer is? And I'm like, you know, a couple of the decisions you guys made when you listen to the CI and these, I'm like, why wouldn't you double verify this? You know, this is a big decision you're making to do this, to do that. Well, I don't know, but we could have done this and we could have done that. And we had Paul Manafort here. I'm like, dude, lobbying. Why? It's the dirtiest thing out there. And he's like, well, I totally get it. But, you know, him and Roger Stone started the lobbying firm. I don't know what, one of the most powerful lobby firms that they had together 30 years ago, 40 years ago. He said, well, the other guy's going to do it. What are you going to do? Sit on the sidelines? Okay, valid point. But I like both sides not to do it, right? However, when you look at it now, and you see the kind of money that's being spent on the left for them to push their agendas over. You set aside this lobby stuff out. You set aside corporations.
See, that's the thing about these guys is they think that the Democrats are the left. They're not. But I like a lot of their takes, and I like that they have a robust debate.
Putting money in to who they buy. Like, you know, the joke about Koch brothers. Well, you know, he wakes. Enemy feels they can't control you. Dude, we have to eliminate you if we can't control you.
Well, okay, now let's talk about that, though.
Okay.
So now why do I still say he's super
Okay, so let's listen to Cenk's take on why Trump is the ultimate evil.
corrupt? And by the way, those stats you showed are in my book, okay? And I explain why. Once the Supreme Court, activist judges on the Supreme Court changed the rules, they basically allowed for bribery, okay?
That's insane.
They legalized bribery. I outline it perfectly clearly. And there was a guy from the
Remember when Mitt Romney said corporations are people?
Chamber of Commerce, Lewis Powell, who said we could just buy the Supreme.
I don't know if Mitt Romney is people.
If we get on the Supreme Court, we could buy the whole country. Corporations just can outspend everyone, right? And so, and they did it. Nixon said, boom, you're on the Supreme Court, and they did it in Bellotti, they did it in Buckley v. Vallejo, they legalized bribery. Now, Trump had trouble getting money from normal corporate interests. And I agree, that's normally a good thing, right? So what did he do? He had to go make up the money. So he went and talked to Sheldon Adelson. So Sheldon Adelson is actually, before he passed away in 2021, largest political donor in history. He gave $100 million to Trump twice, to him and his PACs in 2016 and 2020. What did he get in return? He got corruption charges in China dismissed against him.
To be fair, he's like the Soros of the right. He was like the Soros of the right.
That's
Vegas, casino tycoon, pro-Israel.
He got everything. He's the guy who got the embassy moved. He's the guy who repatriating taxes from abroad because most of his.
Yeah, that's one of the things when people are talking about RFK. Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which was like a no-no on so many levels. No one was going to do it, but he did it because Sheldon Adelson gave him all that money.
His money is in Macau, China, because that's where most of his casinos are.
Business,
And he got that tax knocked down to 8%. So from 35% to 8%, he made billions off of Trump. And on top of getting rid of the corruption charges and the tax cuts and everything, just as a little tchotchke, Trump threw in Miriam Adelson getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
His wife.
So it's just, sure, that's not great, but that's how the game works. And I think the thing that people forget about Trump is that, yeah, he could be bought to some degree, like anyone could be bought, but he also has enough of his own money that I feel like it's like less likely to corrupt him, where it's kind of like, you know what, he's a little bit bullheaded enough that he doesn't have to be bought. But anyway, we could watch this whole thing together. I'm not going to make you do that. There's a couple of other little spots that I pulled out. Hold on a second. Okay. This is a good one. Let's listen to some of this, because the Trump discussion is just frankly getting old. Hold on a second. Here it is. All right.
RFK, when I interviewed him the first time 3 years ago during COVID, I never thought he's going to run. Like, that was never like, RFK's going to run. And I don't even know if he wanted to run. I don't know. You know how some people for years, like DeSantis, I feel like he's been wanting to run his entire life. Hillary, I feel like she's wanted to run her.
Vibe in the Democratic Party.
Okay.
He was elected, Pat, because he sounds like but he's actually not a Kennedy.
They're talking about
anyone there. So, and by the way, RFK Jr. and Marianne combined have about 20 points. So they're 20% of Democrats are like, I'll give it to anyone not named Biden. I don't want that.
80% of that is RFK, and 20% of is Marianne.
That's true.
To be fair,
but to be fair, Kennedy's a giant name versus Marianne, and Marianne's been smeared by the media, et cetera, right? So, but if you're saying, is there an anti-establishment vibe in the Democratic
Hold on a
Party?
second. Marianne's been smeared by the media. Marianne's been smeared by the media. Did you see those hearings a couple weeks ago where they spent like the first half of them calling RFK a racist and an anti-Semite, Cenk?
Party? Hell yes. It's larger than 20%. Why do you think Bernie almost caught Hillary? And by the way,
he should have been the candidate.
By the way, listen to these conservative guys right here. Listen to this.
Candidate.
He should have been.
Of course.
Bernie
And
went Hillary did her due diligence with the DNC, and
they screwed
Debbie
him over.
Wasserman
That was his chance. They screwed
100%.
him over.
Yeah. And look, I said Bernie could win back in 2013, 3 years before he closed a 50-point lead, right?
Yep.
And why? Because there's this great hunger for don't give me fake politicians.
Yeah.
And they have all these stupid mythology that no one believes. Oh, Joe Biden's the boy from Scranton. No, he's a boy from Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not blind. We saw him in
Hasn't
Washington
lived
for
in
the last
Scranton in
50
60 years.
I think the reason people like Cenk hate Trump so much is because they're so similar to him. They see themselves in Trump, because what he's talking about right here is describing Trump's appeal. The reason that people like Trump, even if you think even if he's a con man, he's this, he's that, he's a game show host, but he's authentic about who he is, you know, at the very least. So
Let's get the hell out of here with Scranton, okay? No one believes that horse crap. Like, come on. Oh, and I fought Corn Pop. And shut up. So, like, nobody believes.
A lifetime ago.
By the way, shockingly, the Corn Pop story turned out to be true. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And by the way, Biden lies all the time, and the mainstream media covers for him.
Big time.
So, yes, there's a hunger.
He's the GOAT of that area, though, right? Lying? Would you say you'd put him at the top as the GOAT?
No, Trump's always.
Stop.
No, are you kidding me? Trump doesn't
The guy
stop lying.
doesn't use it. Every speech he ever gave teleprompter was written by somebody else.
He said he cured cancer
definitely.
last week.
The guy but plagiarizing and
but
there's a difference between known lying and not known lying. Like, Trump is knowingly lying, whereas Biden is just literally forgetful and dementia.
Just out of curiosity,
guys, don't ever. I'm putting my foot down here. Don't ever undermine the GOAT of all time of lying, President Joe Biden. Don't ever do that again. That's an insult. Okay? This is a guy that does it in a way.
I never talk to my son about his business
straight
dealings.
look on his face.
Pull
It's
up
just
the amount of
GOAT.
lies in first term.
He's the GOAT. Keep going.
I'm
Go
just
ahead.
curious, Cenk, where was
amount of
Newsom?
lies Trump versus
Stop.
Biden.
Where was Newsom? Did you put Newsom on the list of the people that?
Yeah.
How'd he do?
okay, so anyway, let's it's gonna throw commercials at me now, so I'm gonna find another clip. But I think it's interesting to note that these conservative guys always, like, a lot of my conservative leading friends liked Bernie Sanders for the reasons that they're talking about here, the authenticity factor. And we'll jump up to another piece right here, because this is the one thing I do want to talk about more than anything. Where is it? Okay, this one I got the timestamp on this, right? Okay, so listen to this.
Away, runners, you'd get smoked. No, I wouldn't. You would get smoked. No. You would get destroyed. Absolutely. They would never.
Oh, hold on a second. What am I doing? I got to share my screen with y'all. It's getting late. So this is Cenk talking about when he ran for Congress, and this is actually the reason I wanted to show. This is probably the peak clip in this whole podcast right here,
because Los Angeles Times, New York Times, CNN all told people that I was anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic, anti-black, sexist, into bestiality. Every lie. Voting base is super hungry for an actual anti-establishment person who's actually progressive.
I'm going to go back because you got to hear this.
So RFK Jr.'s got issues with progressive. Marianne's a wonderful person, but mainstream media has done credible damage to her and her perception of credibility.
I love that he's pretending that Marianne Williamson is the one that the media is going after. It's hilarious.
Right? If you give me one strong progressive, we'd run through this field like a hot knife through butter, and we'd run through Biden. Bernie Sanders' number one problem was that he refused to attack Biden. And we all know this. I know everyone in his campaign. They've said it publicly now. They had notes for him to go attack him during a debate, and he wouldn't do it. And honestly, he prioritized his friendship with Biden over all of his voters. And so I love Bernie, but that broke my heart. And so if you said to me, Bernie,
that's a fair assessment.
Running again, I'd say no, because he's not going to run. He's going to get in the race and then tell you Biden is great. No, that doesn't help at all, right? But you give me one strong progressive and we could definitely beat Biden. I got so desperate I thought about myself, right?
Why didn't you?
So look,
you'd have to run as a third party. You can't run as a Democrat.
I'd run as a Democrat. No way I'd run as a third party.
You'd get smoked.
No, I wouldn't.
You would get smoked.
No.
You would get destroyed.
Absolutely.
They would never let a guy like
I know.
They would make you look like shit.
It's already happened.
So look, I ran for Congress once and I got eviscerated by mainstream media. People say, "Hey, why did you lose so badly?" Well, if I had read,
you got 5.4%.
No, I got all the way up to 6.6.
6.6%. Yeah.
Pat, have a little respect.
No. One of them was 5.4%. Then you went up to 6.6%.
You know why? They still didn't stop. California is incompetent in a lot of ways that Democrats don't acknowledge. And they never stopped. They only counted 76% of the vote. If I was Trump, I would say I won. Okay, no. But why did I get only 6.6%? Because Los Angeles Times, New York Times, CNN all told people that I was anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic, anti-black, sexist, into bestiality, every lie in the world. And the New York Times printed it like it was true. And so what I would tell people is if I saw...
Okay, so I just want to stop there for a second because he can sit there and tell you what the New York Times and the, Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post did to him, completely lied and defamed him, but he cannot afford the same, level of sympathy to someone like Trump. So check this out. In this, I just want to read this. This is an article from it's actually from Fox News about the New York Times having to correct their smear against Cenk. New York Times issued a correction Monday night after being slammed for suggesting that liberal host turned congressional hopeful Cenk Uygur had previously defended former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke. The Times ran a report on Friday about how Senator Bernie Sanders had retracted his endorsement for Uygur, after he had faced a backlash for supporting the congressional candidate. Uygur has a history of controversial remarks, many of which were included in the report. So they dug up all his old Young Turk stuff that he said back when he was trying to be Howard Stern about having sex with horses and whatever else, women's quote unquote misogyny crap or whatever. The report also mentioned an interview Uygur had done on his progressive digital outlet, The Young Turks, with Duke, and pointed to a clip that had gone viral on Twitter, reporting that Mr. Duke ends the interview by saying, "I am not what you call a racist," to which Mr. Uygur replies, "No, of course not," which appeared to have been said sarcastically, that's exactly the case. So imagine that, Fox News nailing it right there. But I don't think there's much else in this particular interview that's worth talking about. He goes on to defend Biden, and it's embarrassing. And I recommend you don't watch it. It's really not. I was like really digging for interesting stuff in it, and it just it's mostly Cenk promoting his book and the typical left-right argument that you would expect in defense of Joe Biden. So for this last little bit, what I would like to do is share with you, I have had this in my head quite a bit for the last several, I guess, days. And I want to share a song with you. And this is a song that, I don't know how much of the music I can actually play. So I'm just going to play a little bit of the music and then read the lyrics. But this is a song by Bad Religion. And if you know Bad Religion at all, they're one of my favorite bands, punk band that has a lot of political messaging in their lyrics. Very intelligent group of young men. Bad Religion. Graffin, I believe, is a professor at UCLA. Brett Gurwitz, the guitar player, very famously runs Epitaph Records and has made careers for countless punk rock bands. And aside from that, I think just Bad Religion is one of those bands that still writes great material and still puts out great music and has for a long time. And so props to them for being so awesome. I don't know what their stance is on the Ukraine war yet. So hopefully they don't disappoint me there and they have at least some healthy skepticism. But the reason I say that is because I want to share this this song with you for a minute. So check this out. Let's just listen to a little piece of this. It's called Let Them Eat War. And it has a guest spot from a rapper named Sage Francis. And, if you listen to underground hip hop at all, you probably know Sage Francis, great rapper. He had a record called Personal Journals that I was real keen to. He has a lot of other good stuff as well. But he was on Epitaph for a minute and he does a guest spot in the song. So let's just listen to like a couple of seconds of it to give you an idea for the vibe. Okay, so here, let's go up here. I'm just gonna see if I can get you some. Here we go. Let's get you some chorus, just a little bit of this chorus here, just to give you the idea. Here we go. So the chorus goes like this. So the drummer on this record too is this cat Brooks Wackerman, who plays with Avenged Sevenfold now. But what I'm going to do is let's read the lyrics, because I think this is a song that the lyrics are, to me, very well written and intelligent. So first verse goes, there's a prophet on a mountain and he's making up dinner with long division and a riding crop. Anybody can feel like a winner when it's served up piping hot. But the people aren't looking for a handout. They're America's working core. Can this be what they voted for? I wonder how many people voted for Joe Biden because they wanted a war with Russia. Do you think there's a lot? I'm sure there is. That's a joke. So the chorus, let them eat war, let them eat war. That's how to ration the poor. Let them eat war, let them eat war. There's an urgent need to feed declining pride. You got to love that. So here's the second verse. From the force to the union shops. The force, I'm sure he means the police force. The war economy is making new jobs, but the people who benefit most are breaking bread with their benevolent hosts who never stole from the rich to give to the poor. All they ever gave to them was a war and a foreign enemy to deplore. That's an advertising. See Bad Religion live. This is more advertising. I might also like God's Love, by the way, which is a great Bad Religion song as well. So here's the chorus again. There's an urgent need to feed. Let them eat war. Let them eat war. So guitar solo. So here's Sage Francis's verse. And I wanted to especially shout this out because it's pretty damn good. We've got to kill them and eat them before they reach for their checks. Squeeze some blue collars. Let them bleed from their necks. Seize a few dollars from the people who sweat because it's freedom or debt and they won't question it. At a job site, the boss is godlike. Conditioned workhorses park at a stoplight. Seasoned vets with their feet in nets. A stone's throw away from a rock fight, but not tonight. Feed 'em death. And so then right here, they kind of chant together, feed 'em, not feed 'em. That's like this cool little chant, like, feed 'em death. Here comes another ration. Feed 'em death because they're the finest in the nation. Yeah, I got it. Feed 'em death, but there's nothing left to feed 'em with because it's freedom or it's death. Let them eat war. Let them eat war. That's how to ration the poor. There's an urgent need to feed. That's just a nice cap off for my very war-driven stream tonight. Very war-focused. There's a long pause there because I want to tell you too, this is episode 30 for me. This is the 30th episode of this thing that I've been doing. And what I did the other night is I put all of these together. I'm going to put them up as an audio podcast. I'll start posting these to, wherever podcasts are. But also around the 1920 mark, about 10 episodes ago, is when I started doing the live streams. And like a dummy, I didn't record. So there was one episode that YouTube actually removed. They gave me a warning. They didn't give me a full strike for it. But I was able to, usually they won't let you download that, but I was able to extract that in my own private way, which I won't go into detail. The quality is not great, but at least I have the audio. And I can always recut the video for the stuff that I shared during it. But it's basically my band podcast that I did on here. It's episode like 19 and a half, because after it got pulled, I just did the episode again. I didn't do the episode again. I did new content, but it's like the transition episode between 19 and 20. So it's kind of like a lost episode. So I'm going to put that up on Rumble, but then also the rest of my episodes, I'm going to start, having them up in an organized fashion, and just doing a better job of kind of, being more religious about going live and everything. And if you're watching tonight, I'm going to get better about not muting myself and forgetting. So thank you for hanging in there. And thank you for in the comments saying, hey, bro, your mic is muted. That's one of the dangers of doing the solo show. I'm envious of the Dissidence cats, of Russell and Keaton, because they have, kind of each other to bounce things off. And, they've been doing this for a long time. They're clearly very comfortable where they're at. So I'm getting comfortable. I think I'm pretty comfortable, but it's once I clean up those little types of mistakes right there, like, leaving my mic muted, that kind of crap, I think things will be much better. So hopefully something of value came out of tonight. Thank you if you're out there listening on the live stream, watching. Appreciate you cats. And I'll be back soon. I'm going to try to do this a little more frequently, but you can always pretty much count on a Wednesday night. So thanks again for listening, y'all. Take good care of yourselves, and have a great night.